And he stated this, quote, "The percentage of nucleotides in the human genome that had one-to-one exact matches in the chimpanzee genome was 84.38%. That's pretty close to Tompkins' 85% similarity that Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins found." Greetings to the brightest audience in the country. This is Real Science Radio. I'm Fred Williams.
And I'm Doug McBurney, Bible student, science geek, amateur comedian. Fred, it is great to be back with you talking about real science on Friday.
So this is part 4 and the conclusion of our debunking the fake science of Professor Dave and his ironically named 5-part series, The Definitive Guide to Debunking Creationists. So in our prior 3 shows, we covered part 1 and 2 of his series, and we'll now debunk in just this show the rest of his series, parts 3 through 5. And the reason we plan to use less time is because much of what Professor Dave presents in these last 3 videos, Doug, has already been refuted like many, many times over on Real Science Radio. We've talked about these topics ad nauseum in some cases. So we'll provide a summary list of all the factual errors in Professor Dave's videos with links to the RSR webpage that we've created for these shows. And that's going to be at rsr.org/Professor Dave Fact Check. You can go there and click on links and to all of the things that he claims, and we'll provide a rebuttal to those claims, a refutation to those claims. So, Doug, I say we start off with one that is such a death blow to evolution that if folks wanted to skip the rest of the video, they can. I mean, we don't want them to, because we're going to go through a lot of his claims. But this first one, it's enough to end the debate. I mean, there's been a lot of nails in the coffin, but this one's, to me, is like a huge spike right in the middle of evolution.
I'm good with that, Fred. Let's start right there. Like you said, it's nails in the coffin, but this is really the big one that, I mean, it ends the debate. It's indisputable. Let's play this brief clip from David James' Part 4 video on genetics and molecular biology.
Furthermore, new enzymes don't have to function optimally. They can perform a function with moderate efficiency and then get refined by natural selection over time. And finally, we know for a fact that many different sequences can perform the same function because different organisms have different versions of the same enzymes.
Okay, Doug, a couple of things to unpack here. So first, evolutionists assume new enzymes are created by gene duplication. That's one of the huge tenets of their theory. So this is actually an assumption that really is yet another example of circular reasoning or flawed reverse engineering. Either way you want to look at it. It's interesting how AI responded when I told it there is no evidence that gene duplication led to a new functional gene. So when I put that into AI responded, "This statement is not accurate. There is substantial evidence that gene duplication has led to the evolution of new functional genes across various organisms, with research highlighting its role in adaptation and evolutionary novelty." So here's the supporting evidence that AI generated. "Studies across diverse species have identified cases where duplicated genes have evolved distinct functions, often related to environmental adaptations or specialized cellular processes." Okay, well, let's see. Then it lists examples. It says, the first one it lists globin genes in humans. The different globin proteins involved in oxygen transport are thought to have arisen from gene duplication events. So, Doug, does that sound like evidence? They are thought to have risen from gene duplication events.
Evidence can't be thought to have. Can it?
No. I mean, is that really evidence? They're thought to have.
Okay.
So they're assuming evolution is true.
Yeah, right. So let's hear their next line of evidence. What else does AI got for us?
Yeah, then the next one is the immune system genes. The diverse repertoire of antibodies in the immune system is largely attributed to gene duplication and subsequent mutations. So this is really, Doug, it's using an example of the immune system, and the immune system is designed to be that way. It's not something that evolved, and so it's using something that isn't evolution. It has nothing to do with evolving new genes. Instead, It's really clearly designed to provide a vast variety of those antigen binding sites to find a match that will kill the invading pathogen. So this is what AI went on to say. It said the most prominent example of gene duplication in the immune system is seen in the variable regions of B cell antibodies and T cell receptors, where multiple copies of gene segments are rearranged to create a vast diversity of antigen binding sites. That's all designed into the system. That's not the evolution of new genes over time. That's not neo-Darwinism. So that's a bad example. It's not an actual example of gene duplication that led to the evolution of new genes. So there is really no evidence for it. There's assumptions that it happened, that gene duplication happened in the past. That's long been an assumption that they try to get as a way to generate new information. And it just doesn't work, Dave. And then next, Professor Dave says that natural selection is then free to refine the enzymes over time. This, of course, is more just so storytelling with no evidence to support it, unless you want to count their circular reasoning as evidence. You know, as Dr. John Sanford has eloquently laid out, natural selection can't select enzymes. It only works at the organism level. It can only select like an entire person or organism. So that means much more prevalent random mutations, which by their nature will have an extremely higher probability of causing harm, will create so much noise that any perceived beneficial refinement simply will never happen. And here's the thing, many types of cancers have been traced back to mutations that were caused by, guess what, a gene mutation, a gene duplication, a mutation that caused gene duplication. So their evidence for useful functional genes having been duplicated is all based on their assumption that evolution must be true. It's a case of tangible evidence versus their storytelling. So Professor Dave is proselytizing an intellectually dishonest evolutionist talking point that has never passed the smell test, and that's what he's doing. This whole gene duplication has happened over time and has led to new novel genes. It's a myth. There's not really concrete evidence to support it. It's all based on an assumption.
Yes, yes. And Fred, this is where we need to bring in the big hammer that Professor Dave, he's not telling his audience about. It's another big hole in the cheese that epitomizes their theory. It's the simple fact that none of these enzymes have a common ancestor. Go back and watch our show, right? Remember, go back. You can watch our show last May with Sal Cordova, who, remember, he got atheist Aaron Ra to like scream out in something like horror, proteins do not have an ancestor. It had to be something like horror because of the profanity that I've edited out. But anyway, so that's game over, Fred.
Yeah, absolutely. So he admits that proteins do not have a common ancestor. There is no homology between proteins. So, you know, this has been game over for a long time. We don't think evolution is if it's a theory that's been falsified. In order for something to be a theory, it has to be falsifiable. Well, guess what? It's been falsified. And I love this one that Sal Cordova brought up. It's such a valuable argument to the creationist movement. It ends the debate. It really does. Again, the debate's been over for a long time in our mind, but we'll go ahead and emphasize this one because there's just no way you can get around it. It's a devastating blow to the theory of evolution.
That's right. And so at this point, our radio audience can turn the dial, look for something else. On YouTube, you can go watch some funny cat videos or watch my buddies over at Grace Ambassadors. If you want to hear some good preaching, we can even link to that. But you might want to stick around. I'm going to stick around, Fred. I hope you will. We're going to fact check more claims by David James. That even rhymes. And we're going to give some quick rebuttals. We'll provide a summary list, by the way, of all the false claims that he's made throughout the video series. A series that has completely failed to debunk anything except maybe catastrophic plate tectonics, and even that would have been by accident, Fred.
Okay. So I want to get to this next claim by Professor Dave, and it's simply off the charts in fake science. So let's roll the tape.
Significantly harmful mutations are not often observed because those organisms tend to die quickly without reproducing, so we disproportionately observe beneficial mutations and improved function, which can appear like design to the unprepared mind.
Oh, man.
Unbelievable. So, Doug, this is laughably false. Now, I might get in trouble with our producer, but this is just rank stupidity. What else? I struggle because I don't want to.
Stupid is as stupid does. I mean, it's a profound statement.
Yeah, well, maybe I should water this down. And, there's this famous scientist, Lord Kelvin. You've heard of that guy, right?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So he remarked that the atheistic idea is so nonsensical that I cannot put it into words.
Yeah.
So my producer probably wishes that I would not have put that into words, just how dumb that was. So the vast majority of documented random mutations are considered at best near neutral. And when they say near neutral, they mean slightly harmful, Doug. That's so that right there at near neutral, okay, slightly harmful.
Yeah.
It's easy to find secular scientists in his aisle and Professor Dave's side of this debate who would dispute his claim. And so, Doug, here's a quote from the NIH, PubMed. It says, in fact, most mutations with observable phenotypic effects are deleterious, which means most are harmful. And a 2022 Nature article shows that even silent mutations are harmful. So again, that page we mentioned earlier, it's at rsr.org/Professor Dave Fact Check. You can go there and click on whichever claim he makes. It'll show our answer to it, and it'll provide the links to our answers. So you can see everything. We're going to have that there again on one web page that people can go to if they watch these fake science videos by Professor Dave. You can go here and find claims he's made and find out the truth behind the claim. And is it true or not?
Yeah.
And he has very few things he says that are true.
Yeah. And recall, Fred, from our interview just this past summer with Jerry Bergman, when he researched the scientific literature on mutations, if I recall, he found 186 beneficial ones out of over 500,000 hits. And then when he examined those, they all included a loss of some function. So let's just go now to the next clip so that we can hear some more storytelling from David James.
Nature creates many sequences, stumbles upon functional sequences by chance, and those are optimized and amplified by natural selection. Plenty of research has been done which corroborates the fact that totally random sequences are an abundant source of bioactive RNA and peptides. This is not controversial.
No, it's not.
This is not controversial.
No.
So, Doug, this is totally misleading. And really, it shows how desperate they are when they're trying to appeal to randomness like Professor Dave does. So I looked at this article, and Creation Ministries International has a really good rebuttal to it also. So what a few scientists did is they inserted some random RNA into the cell of an already existing gene, and noticed that some gene regulation activity changed, okay? So they provided no evidence that the bioactivity improved the cell. I mean, Doug, what are they trying to get back? Zero, zippo. No evidence that it improved the cell. So out of literally millions of sequences that they started with, they found 700 active sequences for which roughly 150 were from the random piece that they inserted. So, while this is an interesting find that some of these kind of did something, it's totally false for Professor Dave to claim, quote, totally random sequences are an abundant source of bioactive RNA and peptides. That's pure nonsense. They are grasping at straws. And the experiment did nothing to show the evolution of functional genes. So as Dr. Rob Carter pointed out in the CMI article, they're playing fast and loose with the facts, and Dr. Carter provides more fatal problems for this study that, again, we'll link to, and just go to rsr.org/Professor Dave Fact Check.
There you go. And now I want to get to this next one because he brings up Haeckel's embryos. he starts by championing. I know, to even say it, it's like, really? Okay. But he starts by championing Hox genes as a mechanism for drastic changes to body plans during development. And by the way, David James says he will pay a creationist $1 million if they can give a detailed answer on how body plans are implemented during embryonic development. Now, Fred, since we have many scientists who are creationists who can provide a detailed answer, I'm thinking, Fred, John Sanford, Georgia Perdome over at Answers in Genesis.
Yeah, Dr. Rob Carter, who we just mentioned, Nathaniel Jensen, both of these guys we've interviewed on RSR, they could definitely provide a pretty detailed answer. So hopefully Professor Dave will fork over $1 million to like some of our favorite creation ministries, like Creation Ministries International, ICR.
Yeah.
There's Jeffrey Tompkins over at ICR. He's another one who could explain all this. He's got a degree, I believe he's got a PhD in molecular biology or some related science. So there's tons of them out there. Yeah. So there's a lot of
Fred, but they're not dropping their current projects and rushing to meet Professor Dave's $1 million challenge, because there's less evidence that David James has $1 million than there is for abiogenesis. So that's not happening. So anyway, Fred, these Hox genes, though, I mean, they appear to control the development of body structures and the body plan of organisms. I mean, think of a conductor conducting an orchestra. They work by ensuring that the various development processes happen at the right time and in the right place, guiding the formation of different parts of the body in the correct order, in the correct location along the anterior, posterior axis, head to toe, head to tail.
Well, let me stop you there, Doug. So I think you should get $1 million.
Hey,
I mean, that's fairly detailed. I mean, it's not as detailed as, Dr. Sanford or Dr. Carter or Dr. Jensen, Dr. Tompkins. They would probably provide a little more detail. But Doug, you deserve $1 million. And you know what Steve Martin says? You know how you make $1 million?
No,
First,
how do you do it?
You need $1 million. First, you need $1 million.
Start with $1 million. Right. Well, yeah, wait, now David James said, now he didn't demand that I don't have to have a PhD. He just said a creationist, which I qualify for that. So maybe I wonder if he has a grant application type form that I could fill out to see if I can get. Well, listen, but I want to finish on, to get back to the science of it, David James is asserting that, for example, these Hox genes, mutations in these genes, he says, could lead to evolution of new functions, such as creatures in an aquatic habitat, developing webbed feet. But if you listen and watch, you'll notice, Fred, the examples he provides are all harmful, like a fly growing legs instead of antenna, people with deformed fingers. This all leads him then to embryology, where he shows Haeckel's fake drawings. And this should be the stake in the heart of David James' professorship. Watch this.
We have 10 to 12 tail vertebrae before they retract into the soft tissue. It would seem odd from the perspective of design that embryos would go through stages where structures grow that will not be present on the mature organism. But it makes perfect sense in the context of evolution, where development begins a certain way, and then mutations cause gene expression to change at a particular stage, where existing structures then become reduced or modified. What Haeckel correctly showed was that all chordates go through a phylotypic or pharyngula stage, where the embryos of animals as diverse as elephants and sharks look extremely similar.
Yeah, Doug, I guess I'm not really surprised that his image, the one he uses, is from Haeckel's fake drawings.
Yeah.
Later in the video, he admits that Haeckel was wrong about this thing called ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, which has long been disproven. But he's either unaware or doesn't care that embryos of different animals are very dissimilar. As we're showing now, if you can go to the YouTube video, we're showing an image, and you can go to the website into the rsr.org/Professor Dave Fact Check. we're showing what these embryos actually look like between these different animals, and they're really different. So he also brings up this whole long refuted myth about the humans having a tail. And, real scientists and surgeons have been saying for decades that this is false, totally not true. So there's a structure that drops off. It serves like a scaffolding, much like the mold to an arch, and it's removed once an arch is finished. So they look at those and says, that was remnants of a tail. So this is according to the physician and surgeon, Dr. Michael Egnor, and he's the vice chairman at the Department of Neurological Surgery and the director of pediatric neurosurgery at State University of New York at Stony Brook. So this guy's got the credentials. He's done all kinds of surgeries in this area. And he stated this about human tails. And this is regard to the surgeries. None of them, and none of the reports in the literature that I know of, are actual tails. A tail has a vertebrae, is a continuation of the coccyx, has developed muscles, nerves, and other soft tissues, etc. None of the structures of a tail, even in rudimentary form, and none of the ones I have operated on were attached to the coccyx in the way that a tail is. So it's long been refuted, but again, he had to bring it up.
Yeah, right. And Fred, after that last career-ending Haeckel bit from David James, I mean, I know he goes on to say that Haeckel was wrong about this or that, but Fred, the fact that he showed the pictures, anyway, so it's a career-ending bit, in my opinion, for David James. But let's give our audience some relief, because it's time, Fred, for the interesting fact of the week.
Oh, okay. Good way to, kind of give the audience some breathing room here, after that nauseating bit.
As we all lament the end of David James' career and the sadness around all that, and we should be composing prayers for David James, for his career, and for his wife and children who have to eat, and of course for the destiny of his eternal soul. While we're all composing those, we can do our interesting fact of the week.
Before we continue today's show, this is Telethon Month at KGov and Real Science Radio. We are looking for 30 signups to help us stay on the air in Denver and to also expand our YouTube production efforts. Here's a brief message from our executive producer.
Hey everyone, are you looking for in-depth Bible studies that will challenge and grow your faith? Well, I've got something really special for you. My dad, Bob Enyart, left us an incredible library of Bible study teachings that dive deep into God's Word with boldness, clarity, and a touch of humor. His teachings were simple yet profound. He believed that the Bible tells a cohesive, unified story, and to understand any verse, you have to understand its context within the chapter, that chapter's context within the book, but then, and this is what a lot of Bible teachers miss, that book's context within the entire Bible. When you sign up, you'll get access to his entire library of audio Bible study teachings, hundreds and hundreds of hours of Bible studies at your fingertips. We've laid them out in an order that we recommend listening to, starting with the work that he was the most proud of, The Plot. It's a seminar series that provides a bird's eye perspective of the entire Bible, and it's been a game changer for so many. If you don't find this Plot seminar series incredibly valuable, we will offer a 30-day money-back guarantee for your first month. After the seminar series, Bob will take you through the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, always starting with an overview before diving into the details. Although we have a recommended study order, left to right, top to bottom, feel free to jump around. If a study catches your eye, jump right in at your own pace. If the price is a concern, please reach out and we will find a way to make it work. We want to be a blessing to you just as you have been a blessing to us. It's our primary goal to get you excited about studying the Bible. Sign up now at enyart.shop. That's enyart.shop. You're in for a real treat.
Okay, so here we go, Doug. Here is the interesting fact of the week. So what is the capital of California?
Are you serious?
Well, you live in California, right?
So what immediately
Softball?
comes? What immediately comes to mind is Hollywood, but I know that's not true. Although it is the leading exporter of all things degenerate. That's the capital of degeneracy in the world is Hollywood. But I know that's not the capital city, because the capital city is a rather nondescript inland area for defensive purposes, and I'm putting it together, and I think it's Sacramento.
The capital of California is C.
You're killing me. That is not fair.
Okay, Doug, I had to throw that one at you. I'll give you the real interesting fact of the week. That one came in from a listener, by the way. I didn't think up that one.
Okay.
Someone said I need to ask you what the capital of California is, and it's C. Okay.
That listener is banned. He's shadow banned.
Okay, so here's the actual interesting fact of the week. Which Austrian botanist laid the mathematical foundation of the science of genetics?
Okay, so now what was the nationality of that botanist again?
Austria.
Austria. So that's where you lost me, was that Austrian botanist.
Yeah, he's basically the father of genetics, you could say. He laid the mathematical foundation.
Oh, and this is one that once you say it, I'm going to feel so dumb that I didn't know. Am I allowed to ask for help? I got no help. I got no help, Fred.
You got no help.
Let's see. Was it Arnold Schwarzenegger?
I like the guess, though. It's Gregor Mendel.
Mendel! Oh, Mendel's a cow. See, I feel like a moron. Yeah.
Well, you know, these questions come at you and you're like, oh man, I probably would have missed it. Just draw a blank, even though it's the answers, we would know if we had a multiple choice. So, and of course, he was a very strong Christian. That's often not mentioned. He's yet another one of the founding fathers of a science who was a Bible-believing Christian. So
that's right.
Anyways,
that's right. And so, Fred, this is an appropriate segue. Now that I feel like a moron, we can do more on Professor Dave.
More on Professor Dave. I like that.
That's right.
Okay. So for the rest of the show, let's quickly rifle through claims that Professor Dave's made and our response to them. So here's the first one. When Christians ask if we evolved from monkeys, why do we still have monkeys? They are misrepresenting evolution. And Doug, for this one, he gets... It's actually true.
Yeah, technically true. We're giving David James the benefit of the doubt here. Even though he overstates it, it is true that plenty of Christians make this claim. But as we mentioned on a previous show, I've never met any adult, educated creationists familiar with the origins debate that's ever claimed this. But Fred, I do remember when I was in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, when I was first being indoctrinated with the evolutionary worldview, as a 3rd grader, that thought came into my mind. If we evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? And the reason a 3rd grader thinks about it that way is because at that level, that is what they're saying to the children. They break it down into that simple of an indoctrination point, that it would make a 3rd grader think that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Doug, because I know people who are not involved in the evolution debate, but are on that side of the aisle. They have a secular worldview, and they'll say the same thing. Yeah, we evolved from monkeys. Mm-hmm. And, we still have monkeys, but we evolved from monkeys. We evolved from apes. So that was ingrained in the minds of people. And that's why that gets said. But, technically we're supposed to say that we evolved from a common ancestor. We didn't evolve from apes. We evolved from an ape-like creature that's a common ancestor.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt because there are Christians who do say that. So here's the next claim. Christians wrongly attribute a cow giving birth to a sheep to evolution. So, Doug, I think this one we label is partly true, but it's misleading. Yeah. And as you said, the last one, I've heard some Christians say this. but never an informed creationist. You'll never hear someone from Answers in Genesis say this, from ICR, from CMI, anybody who's even, I think, slightly informed on the creation debate. But here's the great irony of this, Doug. There's actually an evolutionary scientist, a guy named Richard Goldschmidt. He proposed something called the hopeful monster hypothesis. So this guy, he actually rightly noted that neo-Darwinism could only account for small-scale change that they term as microevolution. You know, Professor Dave says that's the term we came up with. That's totally false. We're not even putting that on our list. It's not, you know. But anyways, they came up with the phrase microevolution. We wouldn't ever want the word evolution in there because it's an illusion that evolution is true. But again, nobody disputes microevolution, that small-scale change occurs. So hence, this Goldsmith, he came up with this lame idea because he's committed to an atheistic worldview. He came up with this really lame idea that macro mutations in the right place could yield a new species in a single generation. And there are still evolutionists today who still defend this idea. So they're the ones who are coming up with a cow can give birth to a sheep, much closer, at least, than we ever, you'll have some uninformed people say that, but evolutionists who are scientists will claim that. And Doug, I equate it to, it would be no different if we claimed evolutionists believe flat Earth because the head of the Flat Earth Society is an evolutionist. That would be totally disingenuous,
yes.
Just like Professor Dave's claim. And really, it's just childlike behavior for him to bring stuff like this up. And it just amazes me how many subscribers he has to his channel. I guess it doesn't amaze me because of the state of the world and how easy it is to dupe people, and people just, wide is the path to destruction. And narrow is the path of those who find truth, unfortunately. But
there's a lot of people who want to be lied to because it makes them feel better about themselves. They have unresolved sin in their life, and instead of seeking the truth and God to solve that sin problem, instead they try to cover it up with a worldview that justifies themselves, and unfortunately, Professor Dave is a high priest of that religion. But let's go to another one of his claims. The claim that 90% of the DNA is not functional. I'm embarrassed to even bring this up as if it's still discussed. 90% of the DNA is not functional. It's junk DNA.
Yeah, well, that's obviously false. So back in 2014, we already knew 80% of the DNA was functional, and that was according to the Yale School of Medicine, and they were actually reporting from an article in Nature magazine. But they actually rightly point out that even before that, scientists knew for decades that this area of so-called junk DNA, it had to be actually functional or do something. They actually knew it played a regulatory role because mutations in this area, Doug, cause diseases. So you're telling me something that's not functional and you mutate it and it causes a problem? This part of my PC has no value. It's not functional. Let's take a little electrode and zap a bit there. So let's see how it behaves now. And then that particular program stops working. A third grader would know that had a function.
Yeah. Well, and it doesn't even take a third grade education, Fred, to realize that if you alter something in the DNA and you get a disease, well, that DNA is not junk. It's not non-functional. I mean, Fred, even Francis Collins at the NIH, he changed his mind. I think it was back in 2015. He basically said that the science around this DNA having some function was irrefutable.
Yeah, he was the director of the NIH at the time. And that's not an institution that is friends with creationists intentionally, that at least.
No.
Even though we use a lot of their data to support creation. So, okay. So, Doug, the next claim is the bacteria flagellum has an injectisome, which is a reduced structure, thereby refuting irreducible complexity.
It's that patently absurd statement. The bacterial flagellum and injectisome, Fred, these are two different machines that differ in both their structure and their function. Irreducible complexity means you can't remove any interacting part of a system for it to remain functional. So which part is old Dave removing from the flagellum where it still works? He's blowing smoke, Fred. That unfortunately, many people watching his videos, they're fooled by the smoke. He's worse. He's blowing smoke through snake oil and selling it, and it's embarrassing. And Fred, you're going to love this next one. Okay? Here's the claim. Random sequences regularly and rapidly evolve function via selection.
I just have to shake my head, Doug. So he's saying random sequences regularly and rapidly evolve function via selection. And this has to be, I think, he said a lot of dumb things, but this has got to be the dumbest thing he said. Again, apologies if my producer, would like me to kind of, water down my words. I don't know. I can't. That is so stupid. So randomness, it's the very opposite of information. I know Dr. Tom Schneider at NIH, he would say the same thing, and he's a committed atheist and Marxist and evolutionist. It's not common sense to make a claim like this. It's well established in information science that randomness is the opposite of information. So there's no way you're evolving a useful function, a function that's an increase in information. Now, if you want to say that, the fly that you talked about earlier, having legs where the antenna, maybe you can call that a function. Maybe he can walk on his head, but he's certainly not going to be able to use it in his antenna. It's a degradation. It's a loss of information. It's a completely ludicrous claim by Professor Dave. He's already been discredited, but this is it's anything but scientific. And it's, again, plenty of people on his own side would look at that and say, come on, you're giving us a bad name here. But a lot of evolutionists actually believe this. I've debated PhD scientists for many years on different forums, and you do get some of them to make incredibly ludicrous claims like this. I've had scientists tell me that cancer is evidence of evolution. Survival of the sickest. That Sal Cordova mentioned how they, survival of the sickest. So I don't know, Doug. Well, let's go on to the next one. I'm about ready to throw up here.
It's like Bob Enyart's old axiom that the evolutionist whose career will advance the most significantly is the one who can make the most outrageous claim with the straightest face.
Yeah. It's so true. Thanks for reminding us of that. So the next claim is that humans and chimps share 98.8% DNA similarity.
Yeah. So note, Fred, they had to get that decimal place in there, just like they do with their 4.543 billion year age of the Earth, so they sound like they've...
Plus or minus a billion years.
500 million, Fred. We don't want to mess that up. So that's all to pretend that they've done experiments or something that gave them an exact number. And I recall some time ago that with just the Y chromosome, after it was finally sequenced for both chimps and humans, the difference was around 30%, which I remember the evolutionists who discovered it gasped that the difference was horrendous. You remember?
Oh, yeah. And horrendous, again, that's not a very scientific term, but it definitely was horrendous for them, for the Y chromosome to be so different between humans and chimps when we actually sequenced that. It was a shock to them. It's not surprising to us. So this old canard of 98% similarity has been refuted for years. And even when we gave them 98%, that 2% difference was enough where mathematically you still couldn't get a human from a chimp-like ancestor. You just couldn't do it. It was called Haldane's dilemma. We won't even get into that. But I did want to mention Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins of ICR. We mentioned him earlier. He analyzed the fully sequenced data and found that the similarities were closer to 85%. And then some years later, University of London evolutionist Richard Buggs, he analyzed the results of his own comprehensive comparison of the new chimp genome with the human genome and posted his shocking anti-evolutionary findings. And he stated this, quote, "The percentage of nucleotides in the human genome that had one-to-one exact matches in the chimpanzee genome was 84.38%. That's pretty close to Tompkins' 85% similarity. Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins found, Doug. And, I've met Dr. Tompkins. He just exudes competence. He's a confident guy, but not in an arrogant way. And this guy's really smart. And I'm sure this Richard Buggs is really smart. He's an evolutionist, but you've got an evolutionist and a creationist who both come to the same result when you actually look at real data, Professor Dave.
Yeah.
That 98.8 was always a speculation based on small amounts of sequences, and then they extrapolated, they made assumptions. That's how they arrive at that. The last time I was in Washington, D.C., the Smithsonian Institute still says it's 98.8%. It's all a myth. And it's brainwashing. The masses are being brainwashed, but we're here at Real Science Radio to give you real science.
Amen. And that's, as creationists, Christian creationists, we weren't shocked when Buggs released the shocking percentage of 84.38, which I appreciate his decimal point there. But I like that Jeffrey Tompkins just said, it's about 85%. That's... Anyway, Fred, here's another claim. Here's another claim from David James. Multicellularity, endosymbiosis, corroborates the evolution of single-cell organisms to multi-cell organisms. Fred, eukaryotes to prokaryotes.
So, Doug, this is grasping at straws, as grasping as you can get. So I was recently in Costa Rica. It was nice to get away for a little bit, and I was trying to think of an analogy when I had heard this claim he made, and I thought, there's a ton of driftwood floating around. I did some deep sea fishing, which was kind of cool. We even caught an octopus, and there was black ink on the deck of the boat. It was kind of interesting. Kind of felt bad for the octopus. They're pretty smart. Anyways, but they're delicious. But anyways, as I digress. So this would be akin to claiming two pieces of driftwood getting stuck together suggests that if we wait long enough, Doug, we'll get a yacht. That's really, I don't think that's a bad analogy. Now, where my analogy partly fails is that driftwood getting stuck together, it really wasn't designed to be that way, but I'm pretty sure God designed this mechanism where some of these single cells could merge and, corroborate in a certain way. I don't know exactly. I'm not a molecular biologist, but I'm sure there's design there. But you can't get something like they claim and somehow justify the evolution of eukaryotes to prokaryotes, to single-celled, the multi-celled animals. It's a pipe dream. Where's all the information that's going to let this happen? What about the very fact that reproduction, the whole process of conception, and how you've got an elaborate mechanism just for when the sperm fertilizes the egg and zap, you have to keep all the other sperm out or you're going to have polyspermy, which is really, really bad. So there's an elaborate designs everywhere in biology. And, that's why God said, you will be without excuse. When you believe evolution, you'll be without excuse. So that one's pretty desperate, Doug. So this next one, unbelievable. Here's the claim. The transitional morphology of whales is immaculate. Professor Dave likes to use these kind of words. Immaculate, perfect, perfection. I've never seen anything better. This is fantastic. Okay, so here's what I know. I have an old evolutionary textbook. It's not that old, but it's one they use in college. And from that textbook, it says Pakicetus, one of these transitions, is known from a skull. Pieces of a skull, Doug. And from fragments of a skull, they create an entire organism. So they really play fast and loose with the fossil data. And this is another example. And we've got a great webpage on it. We've been complimented on our webpage, Refuting Whales, for a long time. Bob Enyart put together this page. It's rsr.org/whales. So please go there. That's a response to this whole nonsense of this immaculate transition. It's not immaculate at all. And, Philip Gingrich, he admits that Rhodocetus had no flippers and no fluke tail and certainly no blowhole. So what millions of evolutionists believe regarding whale fossils is based on fabricated and fully falsified misinformation, Doug.
Yeah, it's almost as embarrassing as showing the Haeckel pictures. I mean, not quite as embarrassing, but it's on that career-ending level for David James.
Exactly.
So now, how about this one, Fred? Here's another claim. The Lucy fossil proves she was bipedal.
Yeah. So he used the words proved. It's immaculate. It's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we did a great show with Dr. Carl Werner. Remember those shows, Doug? On the hundreds of frauds of human evolution.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to mention 3 of the frauds. So Donald Johanson, he claimed that all analysis showed that the knee joint was human. And so Dr. Carl Werner went and interviewed, and Dr. Carl Werner did this work over many years. I mean, the amount of work he did to interview these guys and track them down. He interviewed Dr. Donald Johanson's partner, the dig site partner, and his dig partner said it was an ape. Dr. Werner was shocked when he said that, but
yeah.
So Johanson, it's a fraud for him to keep that from the public. His partner sure didn't think it was the knee joint was human. Totally false. And then the second fraud was Johanson hid the fact that a human skull, Laetoli fossil 18, was also found at Laetoli, because they were claiming the footprints there were human-like, so that proved Lucy walked upright. Well, guess what? They found a human skull. How many people in the audience know that? And then finally, the third fraud was Johanson hid alterations to Lucy's pelvis to make it more ape-like.
Yeah.
And of course, there's that whole National Geographic where you see a bone saw changing the pelvis because it must have been stepped on. That's what made it look ape-like. It's unbelievable. Yeah. I remember, Doug, real quick, Lord Solly Zuckerman, he once quipped that they're all just bloody apes. And this guy was an evolutionist, but he said that you won't find any science at all in anthropology. He says there's no science to be found there.
That's right.
Right. I guess I digress again. So just go to rsr.org/Lucy.
Or go online and just search the frauds by Dr. Carl Werner, Werner. Search Carl Werner. He's uncovered hundreds of these frauds. It's astonishing.
Yeah, and we had 2 shows with Dr. Carl Werner, and we'll link to those also.
Yeah.
So, Doug, the next claim is Piltdown Man is a singular incident of fraud. A singular incident. And so we've kind of already talked about this.
Yeah, hello.
Dr. Carl Werner has uncovered hundreds of them.
Yeah.
Hey, Professor Dave, you want to bet $1 million that there's not one singular example of fraud in anthropology? And all of these frauds, so why would, if evolution is true, if you have so much evidence and if it's immaculate, why do you have to resort to so many frauds? Why do you have to do this? It's obvious because you don't have the evidence on your side. So again, we're going to link to our interviews with Dr. Carl Werner. Those were fantastic shows. They're actually doing really well on YouTube. And please, if you get a chance, subscribe to our channel, by the way. We need subscribers because it helps our channel get put on other feeds so they can see the show and comment on the videos, respond to some of the criticisms in the videos because it just helps our algorithm. But we're going to provide a list to all of the claims that Dr. James has... Dr. James, my goodness, what a Freudian slip. Professor, in quotes, the debunked Professor Dave. We're going to have a webpage at rsr.org/Professor Dave Fact Check. You can go there. We've got so many more to go through. We're not going to have time, but we've refuted these over and over again. So just really quick, Doug, for example, we'll talk about his claim that Archaeopteryx is a transition from a dino to bird. That's false. All freshwater fish would die after the flood. False. 2 organisms of each species do not have enough genetic diversity to produce a large and healthy population. False. The geologic column is a flawless record of evolution. Everything fits precisely. There are no exceptions. False.
Wow.
Biogeography supports plate tectonics. That's misleading, and we'll explain why. Because the hydroplate theory, we do agree that, when you've got fossils of animals on one side of the, like in Africa, and you've got a different set in South, or you've got similar animals in South America. Well, we do think that the continents broke apart and slid from the mid-oceanic ridge. Well, we've talked about that many times on this show. And then here's another claim. Creationists are lying about the 5 to 10 million year time frame for the Cambrian explosion. False. Claim. Hitler was a Christian and opposed evolution. Mega false. Even the Washington Compost has an article, was Hitler religious? The Nazi leader hated Christianity as well as Judaism. The evidence is overwhelming. He finds one piece where, as a politician, Hitler was, trying to poo-poo to the Christians, which politicians do that. They'll try to appeal to groups that they actually hate. Their actual inner soul hates those groups, and then you find that stuff out later, and we have overwhelming evidence that Hitler was not a Christian. He hated Christianity. He was going to try to wipe out all Christians. We have plenty of evidence for that. He killed lots of Christians in Poland. Anyways, I could go on and on. We've got, famous evolutionist mass murders. Professor Dave isn't telling you, well, I guess maybe he does tell his people he's a communist. So he's going to defend communism, and yet communists have killed more people, mass murders, millions and millions of people. Doug, we're out of time, but you can go to rsr.org/Professor Dave Fact Check to get our responses to all of these false claims made by the alleged Professor David James.
Yes,
now debunked, fully debunked Professor Dave.
Yeah, now he's fully debunked, and again, the Haeckel photos, to me, that's a career-ending move. So anyone who could watch Professor Dave after that, well, you said it earlier, Fred, you're without excuse.
Yeah, exactly. So Doug, I guess we end the series and we can summarize it this way. There's 4 things he does. So he spends a lot of time resorting to straw man arguments and personal attacks. He's constantly caricaturing creationists as not knowing science. And this comes from people, Doug, that hold a worldview that they don't know what a woman is. They don't know when a person's conceived. So many things that they deny. So would Professor Dave or any of his blind followers care to take up a bet with us that random interviews on the street will show that homeschool or Christian school educated people will score far better with questions related to general science, such as genetics and molecular biology, than people taught in the public schools who are going to believe evolution? So that's 1. 2, he includes some science in his content. But it's science that not a single creationist disputes. It's almost like he's trying to give himself credibility. In order to sell a lie, you have to have a lot of truth in it. Rat poison is 99% good food. He spends a ton of time making unsubstantiated claims that are storytelling. And then finally, virtually every claim he makes that supports his evolutionary worldview has already been debunked, often by scientists who are themselves evolutionists. So we can find people even on his side refuting his claims. Again, rsr.org/Professor Dave Fact Check.
Yeah.
And that'll be a useful page for people who watch his videos and you want to go and see, well, what is true about the claim he made? You can go there and find his statement, and we'll provide the answer.
Yeah, and I think I would wrap it up in the immortal words of Edward Van Halen. Come on, Dave. Give me a break.
I love that. Okay. So, for Doug McBurney and Eddie Van Halen, I'm Fred Williams of Real Science Radio. May God bless you.